My name is Mark Massa. I'm the director of the Boisi Center, and we're privileged to have with us this morning a very smart senior in Boston College who's also a minor in the Religion and American Public Life um, program, Liam Adamczyk, who, in fact, besides being an energetic undergraduate research fellow for us at Boisi, is also a research fellow for the Center for Christian Jewish Learning, also at Boston College. So Liam has undertaken a pretty impressive project for the Center for Christian Jewish Learning and has just finished his project. So Liam, tell us a little bit about what you undertook and what you found.
Yeah, so I was looking at Princeton University and the Institute for Advanced Study. The title, I guess, of my paper, my findings is Cooperation Between Jewish and Christian Intellectuals, the relationship between the Institute for Advanced Study and Princeton University. So I was kind of originally actually inspired by when I saw the movie Oppenheimer, just seeing how the workings of these scholars during that time. But also, I knew from my time as a Jewish studies minor, talking to different faculty members about the Ivy Leagues in Princeton, just the anti-Semitic reputation that Princeton held at the time. So I wanted to explore how kind of a safe haven for Jewish intellectuals formed at the Institute for Advanced Studies and what that relationship was with Princeton. And so kind of the means of doing that is I went to the Institute for Advanced Studies and had the privilege of working with their archives at the Shelby White Archives, which is an incredible opportunity. And then I looked at correspondences between the kind of the key figures, specifically the first two presidents, Abraham Flexner and Frank Adeloy, and then their correspondence with the president of Princeton University at the time, Harold Dodd.
Very interesting. Princeton, of course, was founded by the Presbyterian Church.
Yeah.
It was founded by with a group called the Old School Presbyterians. So they're conservative Presbyterians, Northerners, but founded to be sort of like a dogmatic stronghold of Presbyterian theology and life. And also because it's not the most southern of the Ivy League schools. I think the University of Pennsylvania has that honor, but it's considered the most southern in style. That is, it's conservative, preppy, and also word of mouth. There's no statistics. There's no published statistics on this, but it was the last Ivy to have quotas uh, within the college itself. So against Jews, against Catholics, against African Americans. Those, of course, have long since disappeared at Princeton. But Princeton had a reputation of um, being sort of on the conservative side of things and sort of being the last bastion of the really WASP Ivies, the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Ivies. So when you went there, Liam, what did you find? Was there much overt evidence of anti-Semitism? But either in the university or the Institute for Advanced Studies, which is affiliated with the university, but is actually a separate
Yeah.
institution.
Yeah.
So did you find much evidence of?
Yeah, so when I went in kind of half expecting there to be some pretty overt anti-Semitism given the reputation of Princeton, but yep, sorry, my Zoom just okay, sorry. Given kind of the research I did, I didn't really find anything between the university and the Institute for Advanced Studies. There was actually a lot of open communication between the two, and I at the university level, there was definitely anti-Semitism. Like, for example, in the class of 1937, there were seven Jewish students. At the same time, 30% of the faculty at the IAS was Jewish. So certainly the institute was not. But generally speaking, there really wasn't anything I found. The Princeton University was more than happy, seemingly, to help. The first, I think, 5 years was founded in 1930, but I think the first 5 years they actually were in Fine Hall, which was like the mathematics building at Princeton. So, at least on a department level, the mathematics department was more than happy to be working with the institute, just kind of given the scholars who were there. And because Princeton at the time also had a really good mathematics department, so no really overt anti-Semitism that I found.
Okay, the word on the street has always been that, of course, the Institute, which is a sort of a parallel universe to the campus, it's adjacent to Princeton's campus,
Yeah.
not technically on
Mhm.
campus. The word on the street is that Princeton University, a very wealthy institution, allowed and sort of even abetted the founding of the institute as a way of bringing Jewish faculty for research in a safe kind of, quote unquote, safe kind of way, because they would not be members of the Princeton University faculty. They would be faculty in the Institute for Advanced Studies. Is that what you found when you went there?
I do think that was kind of the leverage that the Institute was able to use because the Institute had a lot more to gain from Princeton than Princeton had to gain from the Institute. It felt like, I mean, I think I couldn't really imagine it growing the way it did anywhere else, but I do think that that's kind of what they thought. And Eisenhart was his name. He was one of the deans. He actually did work with the emergency committee in aid of displaced German scholars to, but I think it was more so of a way to get those scholars to the IAS. So yeah, I do think that they were trying to use in a way the IAS to bring in these scholars and then work with their scholars to help them.
So did you, of course, as you mentioned, a significant number of the researchers at the Institute for Advanced Study were themselves Jewish. I think you mentioned 30%. The most famous of whom was obviously Robert Oppenheimer,
Yeah.
who worked on the atomic bomb. But who were the other sort of most the most salient or the most obvious Jewish faculty who were doing research there?
Einstein, of course, was one of them. I do say one of the biggest names at the start was actually a Protestant, Veblen, who was a that's just a mathematician, but he played a really important role in bringing over some of these scholars. But I can't say I did a ton of research into the different, kind of just like the main figures. So I know Veblen played a big role in bringing scholars. Abraham Flexner, who he was the first president, he was actually Jewish himself, and he was a doctor of medicine. He published a few, like the Flexner Report was about teaching modern medicine. So, although he's president, he also had some scholarly duties as well.
So tell us about this committee. You mentioned it just a minute ago. This committee set up to rescue German scholars during
Mhm.
the rise of Hitler and Nazism.
Yeah, so once there was a civil service act passed in Germany that prevented Jewish people from holding positions within the civil service in Germany, which then that was the mid 30s, led to a mass exodus of Jews from Germany. And then a lot for the scholars, a lot of scholars left out of fear. And the Emergency Committee of Aid was actually funded a lot by um, a couple different um, a couple different philanthropists. The Baumgartners, who were the founders of the institute themselves, they had a department store in Newark that they sold, so they helped fund it. Rockefeller also did, but Veblen played a big role in it, and then Eisenhower did too. But they would reach out to different German scholars, and it was kind of a close-knit circle because once they had Einstein, who the institute got, he was kind of like the figurehead. I mean, he was the most famous, probably mathematician, physicist at the time. So who wouldn't want to work with him? And so he had his connections back in Europe. So Princeton actually adopted it very early. They were the first Ivy League to use it, and then with funds from different private institutions, they were able to bring scholars over.
So was there much discussion in the records that you found there? Was there much discussion of anti-Semitism either at Princeton or in the United States at the time?
There really was not from those sources. I did not see really any, which was shocking. But at the same time, I don't think it would be over. It wouldn't be overt. They wouldn't be talking back and forth. And my research was limited to the institute archives, so there was some from the Princeton side of things, but I didn't have many correspondence between Princeton on Princeton faculty. I do think the biggest complaint from Princeton University and the faculty, and I don't think it was necessarily anti-Semitism, but the younger faculty felt kind of disenfranchised by the fact that all these scholars who had tenure, who were very well known, they were more concerned with working with their counterparts in the IAS than actually being mentors. So that was the biggest point of contention was kind of when Dodd talking back and forth with Flexner and Adaloyd about the fact that, he's like, my faculty has more responsibilities than just research and learning. They have to mentor. And there was a lot of, not necessarily they weren't named, but a lot of the younger faculty were unhappy about the fact that they were not getting the same maybe privileges as they'd expected.
Right. I mean, being appointed as a faculty person for the Advanced Institute was a very prestigious thing, among other reasons, because they were freed from a lot of the committee work and teaching, classroom teaching, that regular Princeton faculty were required to do, because at the Institute for Advanced Study, your big and actually only job is to do research. And I think a lot of other faculty who were at Princeton University, a separate, somewhat separate institution, were kind of envious of that and maybe kind of angry about that. Was there much discussion in the records?
It seemed like some of the ones that maybe were more angry kind of threw away some of their administrative work and kind of just did research, which left administration angry at them. So there was a little bit of that because some of them were just more concerned with doing research and they did throw away the other things that they were expected to do.
Interesting. So it sounds like, as Sherlock Holmes once so famously said, the fact that the dog did not bark in the night is also important. So might we then, using your research, the research that you found for your project, might we have to reconsider Princeton's reputation as anti-Semitic? I mean, it in the 1930s brought over all these German scholars, significant numbers of whom were themselves Jewish, to be members of the Advanced Institute and supported their research in a fairly privileged way. Do you think we should have to perhaps reconsider Princeton's reputation as a bastion of anti-Semitism?
Well, that was something I kind of was thinking because going in, I wasn't expecting this. And I don't know if I would go as far to say that because the number, like looking at the undergraduate side of things, I mean, there are stories. The big thing at Princeton was eating clubs. After your first year, you would join an eating club, and that's where you'd have all your meals. And there's stories of Jewish undergrad students who weren't invited to any eating clubs who ended up leaving because, I mean, to not be involved in the eating clubs, you're basically not part of the campus life. So I don't know if I would go as far to say there was definitely some anti-Semitism on campus, and there is, I mean, they'll deny quota systems, but there's some evidence in the early correspondence between Higgins, who was president, or Hibbins, sorry, before Dodd about number of Jewish students, and even Dodd, there's record of him being concerned about the number of students of different backgrounds. So, I mean, I think would this gives Princeton a better reputation than I think I previously maybe thought, but I don't think they're fully free of any.
Okay. Good. So was there free, what you found in terms of the records that you looked at, free and easy exchange between Gentile and Jewish scholars at the Advanced Institute and no
Yeah.
kind of, battle back and forth?
Oh, yeah, I think completely. I mean, one Eisenhardt, who was like I think was the dean or maybe he was the head of the mathematics department, was he said like Fine Hall, which where they worked, there was Fine Hall English because so many of the scholars spoke German and then so many did speak English. So there was really a it was open communication and a lot of the on both sides just they loved the years that they were in the same hall and eventually the institute opened their own hall, Fold Hall, but then it became an issue that the mathematics department was all going over to Fold Hall to work with them. So there was definitely a lot of open communication and really lack of any discrimination between the two different sides.
But I mean, tell me a little bit about how the Advanced Institute ended up at Princeton, because it was such a conservative place, and at least on the face of it, it would have made more sense to have the Advanced Institute at a place like Columbia or Harvard. How did it end up?
Yeah. So the Bamberger siblings, their company, their department store was in Newark, so they were a New Jersey family, and it was really important for them, which they communicated with Abraham Flexner, that the institute be in a really open area. They did not want it in an urban setting, which kind of knocked out a couple different of the Ivy Leagues like Columbia and Harvard. They wanted it to feel secluded and kind of like a haven. And so they reached out to a number of different places, but they found that Princeton kind of fit what they were looking for on a physical level and that they could end up fostering a relationship. And once they signed on a couple different key members at the start, key scholars, I think Princeton was like, okay, we'll work with you. And they had a large endowment from the Bambergers. So I just kind of was like the perfect storm of being secluded. They wanted to be near an elite institution, and originally they actually wanted to start a medical school because Abraham Flexner, that's kind of was his specialty. But they ended up going this direction. But I think they thought if they were going to have a medical school, they needed to be near a top elite institution.
So it sounds like in terms of skin in the game, the Bambergers funded it. Did Princeton University itself put up any money for the Advanced Institute?
Besides like lending spaces, they did not give any money for it. It was basically a large endowment from the start from the Bambergers, but they didn't build like any physical buildings for 5 years. And then once they passed away, they left in their will a large endowment, and they also had money from Rockefeller to keep expanding because Flexner was not the best with the books. He spent a lot of money and brought in a lot of scholars, but financially it wasn't that stable. But no, Princeton did not, offer any real monetary aid besides like space.
So, what's your sense of this? I mean, this is a very interesting story. So, the Advanced Institute sort of grows in the 1930s in a sort of a parallel universe, sort of next to but not on the campus of Princeton University. Princeton gets the reflected glory of all these German scholars, these refugee scholars, many of whom were themselves Jewish. Uh, Princeton University gets the reflected glory of that, and yet is your sense that what happened at the Advanced Institute, did it have any effect on the university itself? I mean, the fact that a third of all the scholars at the Advanced Institute were Jewish, did that change the culture of the university itself, which is right next door?
I think to an extent it did. There's stories of different Jewish scholars, including Flexner himself, actually being mentor figures for the few Jewish students on campus. And there's correspondence. Joe, I forget his last name right now, but he was an undergraduate student that ended up, I think, working with Flexner later on. So I think they did help change the culture. And I think for a lot of the scholars, it helped them. I think they just realized they had a lot to learn from each other. And then as the war effort ramped up, and especially with the eventual like atomic bomb and different science going on, I think they ended up working together. And I do think it played a role in shifting the culture at Princeton.
So one of the things that both the book and the movie about Robert Oppenheimer comes out very clearly is that a lot of these scholars at the Advanced Institutes were lefties. I mean, they were socialists. They had sort of very progressive political views. So besides anti-Semitism, there was a sort of a distrust on the part of certain people in the federal government toward the Advanced Institute because a lot of the scholars researching there were considered progressive and even further left than just progressive. Did you find any evidence of that, or was there any discussion of that in the literature?
There was. So that's kind of one of the reasons they appointed Adaloyd as the second president. He was a Midwestern Quaker. He had a lot of connections. He was the former president of Swarthmore. So they brought him in because Flexner was a lefty, and they wanted to bring in a figure who could help stabilize and not necessarily grow the institution because it was kind of growing almost too fast. But they brought him in to kind of streamline communication and give a base to the institute and have a figure that was a bit more conservative in nature, kind of given his background. So there was a bit of concern from Princeton's side too, like Dodd writing about things that different scholars said. So yeah, that was kind of that was a concern. So they did go about that by that's why they appointed Adelaide as the second president.
And did you, in terms of the political affiliations of these scholars at the Institute, Were they mostly left of center, or were they all over the place in terms of their ideology? I mean, were they
I didn't look into to that too much. I think there were some. I never really read any literature about any of them being on the right, but there are different times about different scholars making public statements that were seen as more liberal. And I think there was always a fear of communism, unfounded, of course, amongst some scholars as well.
because what comes out in both the book, which I read, is in Mammoth book on Oppenheimer,
Yeah, I
and
did too.
is that he was under fairly serious federal investigation because of his supposed close ties with the Communist Party in the United States. Were there other figures you ran across there who were also under investigation for that?
Um, I not that I found. I think what I was looking at was a little bit maybe too early for that because Oppenheimer wasn't there yet, and they hadn't started any nuclear projects yet. And I think once there was research going on that was meant to aid the U.S. government, I think that's when agents got more involved. So no, I didn't really find anything on that front.
Okay. So it seems to me that after the first decade or so, the anti-Semitism of the Institute sort of disappeared because there were so many Jewish scholars there. And there seems to have been a fairly close working relationship between the Gentile and Jewish scholars at the Advanced Institute. And also it seemed to have that experience of the Institute seemed to have a very good effect on the university itself.
Yeah.
You think that is the narrative? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, there's even communication with Father Mackey, who was the president of the theological seminary at Princeton too, which was pretty conservative.
I think you don't want to say father. They're Presbyterians.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, no,
They're rolling in their graves.
yeah,
So
no.
that's the last thing. The Reverend.
Reverend Mackey. So there was community. I mean, they gave he offered space for the institute to use as well, like meeting halls and stuff. So I do think that in a way the Institute for Advanced Study maybe not, I wouldn't say liberalized Princeton, but it definitely ushered in a new era that was maybe less anti-Semitic and opened up this larger scholar community.
Interesting. Yeah, of course, um, most people, including myself, always associate the Advanced Institute with Einstein and Oppenheimer and the work on the bomb. But in fact, there were lots of other scholars doing other kinds of research there than just that. And
Yeah.
the bomb research, of course, came much later after the founding. Um, and was your sense when you were there? I mean, it's quite a spectacular campus. I mean, just in terms of with the big lawn and people working in their offices. Um, was your experience that it's a pretty diverse place now?
Yeah, I think definitely probably more so now than it was then. Because to start, I think it was they had mathematics, and at the time, like physics was part of math, and I think they did economics. But I mean, now they have scholarship in so many different fields. Also, I think they're even more international. I mean, they don't just have scholars from the United States or Europe. They have Asian scholars, South American, African scholars. They have an Asian studies department now too. So I think it's a very diverse place of learning.
Interesting.
And I'll add an anecdote. When I was there was another guy researching at the archives, and he was looking at specifically at I think it was the first scholar for like the first Asian scholar at the institute, and was doing like a big research on that. So there was a wide breadth of what people were looking at.
Interesting. Interesting. Is there anything I haven't asked you that you want me to ask you?
No, I think that kind of covers
Good.
everything in there.
Thank you, Liam. It sounds like you had a very interesting and well done project, more than worthwhile, that helps us sort of explore the history of anti-Semitism in American higher education, most specifically at Princeton. And what
Mhm.
you found at the Advanced Institute actually is quite important because it raises questions about the received wisdom of Princeton University being an anti-Semitic place It sounds like the Institute for Advanced Studies played a big role in helping to ameliorate that. So, congratulations on your work. It sounds like it was a ton of research, was it? I mean,
Yeah, it was a lot. But it was fun, and actually going to an archive was an awesome opportunity. So I really enjoyed it.
you have a moment of panic when I began writing my dissertation. It was sort of like when you find all the boxes and boxes of things waiting for you. Did you ever?
Oh yeah, I definitely had that moment where I was like, I went to the archivist who was super helpful, and I was like, yes, I don't really know what I'm doing, and she's like, oh, what do you want me to pull out? And she just pulls out boxes and boxes of stuff, and I was like, oh, okay.
That's enough. That's enough for
Yeah,
today.
I was like, oh, okay. And then I just sat there for days looking at everything. But no, it was awesome. I want to thank the Center for Christian Jewish Learning for this opportunity. It was really awesome. So
So thank you, Liam, for this interview. Thank Dan Jocelyn Simatowski, who's the wonderful director of the Center for Christian Jewish Learning here at Boston College.